Welcome on into the Wolverine TV. I'm Clayton Sayfie with EJ Holland. We're going to break down the 5 things that we learned about Michigan football recruiting last month. In the month of April, closing that chapter, we are presented by Lewis Jewelers and Manscaped. And EJ, let's get into it with some of the things that we learned. And kind of an eventful month in some ways, in other ways, a little bit more quiet. But we will start with Tyler Morris, obviously making a big splash by committing the Rivals 100 wide receiver out of the Chicago area, has that relationship with Josh Gaddis, Sharon Moore, both offensive coordinators there, Sharon Moore being the co-offensive coordinator and area recruiter, and J.J. McCarthy, the freshman quarterback who is enrolled early right now. He pulls the trigger, jumps on board there, obviously suffered an injury which might have moved up his timeline, but Michigan definitely happy to have him in the fold.
Yeah, Tyler Morris was a big commitment for Michigan. He was one of their top overall priorities this cycle. Definitely came earlier than expected. Tyler wanted to make his visits in the summer before pulling the trigger, had already scheduled an official visit to Notre Dame. Then unfortunately suffered torn ACL and torn meniscus, which kind of sped up his timeline. Tyler wanted to go ahead, lock up a spot, which was a smart play on his end. But despite the injury, I think that puts a little bit of a damper for Michigan fans when they look at this commitment. You're not getting fully healthy Tyler Morris. His offseason's done. His season's likely done. So I'm probably done seeing Tyler Morris in any type of action. It's going to take him a little while to recover. But I think Tyler's handling the adversity well. He's already working hard in rehab, and if Tyler comes back fully healthy, then you are getting an absolute stud. You are getting one of the best wide receivers in this class, perhaps the best hands in this class, an elite level route runner, a guy that has a lot of chemistry with your quarterback of the future in JJ McCarthy, who you mentioned. So I think Tyler's still an elite level land. Look, again, if he comes back fully healthy, you're getting the guy you think you're getting. Is it possible that Tyler doesn't come back 100% from this injury? Sure, but at the same time, I think ACLs have been uh, it, guys have recovered better from ACL injuries as we've moved on with time. I don't think it's necessarily the super catastrophic injury that it once was, even though it carries that stigma. So I think Tyler can recover well. Obviously, it's going to take him a little bit of time to do so. Again, his year is lost, but overall, I mean, you can't get much better at the wide receiver position than a healthy Tyler Morris. And if anyone, again, can overcome the adversity, it's Tyler. He's that type of kid. He's a future team captain. He's a great kid in the classroom, just a great kid in general. So overall, I think Michigan fans should still be very, very happy with the commitment of Tyler Morris.
And I think they are. I mean, when you look at some of the reaction to that commitment, everybody was super pumped about it. Obviously, the injury is something to be concerned about, at least a little bit. But it's more so, I feel like, scanning Twitter and some other message boards of some fan bases that were hoping to land Tyler Morris. It's more of a thing for them to be like, oh, well, he's hurt. We didn't want him anyway. No, I think Michigan fans are super excited about Tyler Morris to be now in this class. And again, a leader in this class and everything you want in a wide receiver, like you said. Obviously, hope he gets healthy sooner rather than later for many reasons. Next thing that we learned, Dylan Tatum has yet to make his decision. Looks like Michigan and Michigan State, the two schools in the mix for him. And he was at Michigan State's spring game about a week ago. Still considering the Spartans, but obviously it seems like it's going to be Michigan at some point. At least that's what a lot of people feel like, especially with Ron Bellamy now being on the staff there. He'd be his position coach at the safety position. So, a four-star defensive back. What are your thoughts on him not making a decision despite him saying that he was going to pull the trigger before the end of April?
Yeah, Dylan has had the April timeline for a while. Obviously, April has come and gone. No decision for Dylan. He does want to make it this month, May now. So we'll see if it actually happens. I don't think this is going to turn into a George Rooks, Drew Kendall situation like last cycle. I do think Dylan wants to go ahead and shut it down soon. He is a little conflicted though. Look, let's start off with Michigan State. They have done a tremendous job recruiting Dylan. I know we've poked fun at Michigan State in the past, but Dylan really, really likes Michigan State. He's connected well with Mel Tucker and that staff. They've made him one of the top overall priorities. I think Michigan State is tired of being Michigan's punching bag on the recruiting trail here, losing Rayshon Benny late last cycle, losing another top target in Tayshawn Trent, not being a factor with Will Johnson, not being a factor with Donovan Edwards. They need a big land in state, and so they are doing everything possible to get that. In Dylan Tatum, like you said, he was on campus for the spring game, so his interest in Michigan State has always been legit. There was even a point where Michigan State, I feel like, had a slight lead for Dylan when Michigan was undergoing the coaching changes and had a lot of staff movement and contact was kind of lost. But it's still so hard for me to believe that Michigan State is going to pull off this upset. When you look at the ties to the program, you have Donovan Edwards, Makari Page, Cornell Wheeler, a lot of West Bloomfield guys there. You have Ron Bellamy, obviously, who's his lead recruiter, former high school coach who led Dylan to a state championship this past season. And Bellamy is also happens to be his lead recruiter and his future position coach if he were to end up at Michigan. I just think there's so many ties to Michigan. I don't know. I just don't feel like he will end up at Michigan State. It's just hard to overcome those types of ties to a program. But Michigan State is doing a good job of selling the don't go and be, another West Bloomfield guy at Michigan, come be your own guy at Michigan State. And I think that's somewhat appealing to Dylan and a big reason that Michigan State is high up there. But I can't imagine him telling Ron Bellamy, hey, coach, I'm sorry, I'm not coming to Michigan. I'm going to one of your biggest rivals. So I don't know. We'll see what happens this month.
I think that's funny and in a good way to look at it in terms of all right, these conversations need to happen, where he would call Ron Bellamy and say, I'm not coming. Like you said, I'm going to an in-state rival, and all that. So that is interesting. And obviously we will see, but give Dylan Tatum credit, for not just rushing a decision, even though, I kind of give these kids credit sometimes when they say they're going to commit by a certain time and they don't, where it's you set that. You can always change it. He's doing his due diligence. He went to the green and white game or whatever they're calling it and wants to, weigh his options, and I think that's completely fair when you're looking at his decision. The next thing that we learned, Courtney Morgan. This obviously some of the bigger news of the month, but he is the new director of player personnel. Matt Dudek, the former director of recruiting, is out. He decided to move on to Mississippi State, and I think Michigan was really looking at changing some things up, and you already kind of saw some changes before all this movement happened, but in their recruiting department, they were looking at doing some things, trying to upgrade there, and I think Courtney Morgan is going to bring quite a lot to the program, a former player, former teammate of Ron Bellamy there, played under Lloyd Carr, was a part of Big Ten championship teams as a right tackle for Michigan, so he knows the culture, he knows how to win championships, he knows what it takes, he knows what kind of guys it takes, because he was in those locker rooms surrounded by, again, championship-winning players at Michigan. So those are, plus, in my opinion, and we're already seeing him hit the ground running here as he begins his tenure.
Yeah, definitely. Look, when I first got on the Michigan beat, almost 2 years ago, I said that Michigan needed a change in the recruiting department. There's no way that Texas should have a bigger and better recruiting department than Michigan. They're both very, very similar blue blood programs. And so I think Michigan's taking the right step toward fixing that issue. Not only did they add Courtney Morgan, they actually just posted a couple of open jobs in the recruiting department to help them out. If you notice, Courtney Morgan's title is Director of Player Personnel and not Director of Recruiting, not because Morgan's not going to do a lot of what Dudek did, but because they are adding some more important and key members to the recruiting department. Who that'll be, yet to be seen. But I think it's definitely a big step forward in the right direction to having a recruiting department that is on par with your biggest rival in Ohio State, and like I said, a similar program like a Texas. So With Courtney Morgan, personally, he's a great relationship builder. An area that I think Dudek struggled in a little bit. I think Morgan definitely has a lot of ties to high school coaches, 7-on-7 coaches, private trainers. He's willing to cast a big net. I do think he's still going to need some administrative help. Something that Dudek was good at was, keeping tabs on Harbaugh's phone calls, keeping a big master list of visits, helping parents with the academic paperwork. All of that stuff comes with having a bigger recruiting department. But from when you're looking at it from a pure recruiting standpoint, from a relationship building standpoint, which is the biggest thing in recruiting, I think Courtney Morgan is a big upgrade there. Like you said, he's a former Michigan player. He understands the culture. He's been out west working at UCLA, Fresno State, from the state of California. So I think he'll help Michigan continue to land guys from the West Coast and even improve those efforts. And I think from a national standpoint, he's just really well respected and has the personality to connect with guys all over the country. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else Michigan does with its recruiting department. I think Matty Dudek did some good things, did some bad things, but overall, it was time for both parties to move on.
Yeah, and for as much as Michigan right now is easy to, kind of criticize or whatever, especially from opposing fan bases, I like some of the moves that they've made this offseason when it comes to recruiting. When you look at Mo Linguist, Mike Hart, Ron Bellamy, we've talked about these guys over and over and over. Mike McDonald, as the defensive coordinator, is getting involved in some recruitments and really blowing some kids away on some of these Zoom calls. Once they get guys on campus, it's going to be that much better, and we're going to hear even more about just how much the staff can recruit. And I think Courtney Morgan's going to be a big part of that as well. You're already seeing guys, kids that get offered, tag him and things like that, showing that he's involved. He's trying to build those relationships, and I think it's going to be, positive going forward in that regard. The next thing, 5-star defensive back Damani Jackson, who is committed to USC, Michigan, led by 5-star cornerback commit for the Wolverines. Will Johnson is continuing to recruit him. We'll talk about that in just a second. Before we do that, we'll remind everybody that support for this show is brought to you by Manscaped, which is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide, and we have an exclusive offer for our viewers and listeners, 20% off plus free shipping with the code 20GOBLUE at manscaped.com, 20GOBLUE at manscaped.com. They sent us a care package. EJ, how you liking your goodies so far?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been keeping me clean below the belt. And it's not just that, they offer all types of products for your entire body. If you have a hairy chest in particular, it can definitely help with that too. So make sure to give Manscaped a try, and you can get it on the go. They gave me a great travel bag that I'm enjoying for all my trips, including the one to this picture to Las Vegas.
Yeah, and that is a great segue, as they say in the business. Let's get into that. I mentioned 5-star USC D-back commit Damani Jackson, the number 2 player in the country. Huge former Michigan target, but like we said, Michigan continuing to recruit him, especially Will Johnson. Those two said at times during the recruiting process before they were committed anywhere that they would like to play together at some point. They played together over the weekend last week when you were out to see them in Vegas. As you can see in that picture, you got Damani giving the fight on. You got Will and Cody Jones, Michigan defensive back, safety commit, given the M. EJ, what are your thoughts on Damani Jackson and the fact that Will Johnson, an ace recruiter, as we talked about quite a bit, is continuing to push for him?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's not going to give up with Damani Jackson, nor should they give up with Damani Jackson. Just because he's committed to USC doesn't mean he will ultimately sign with USC. Will it be tough to pull him away from the Trojans? Sure. He has spent a lot of his time in Los Angeles. He is originally from kind of all over the place. I guess he moved around a lot with his dad having been in the military. He has a lot of family in the Midwest, but he's spent the most most of his, teenage years in California. So he obviously has, Los Angeles area ties. He goes to Mater Dei, which can oftentimes be a feeder school to USC. A lot of Mater Dei kids go there. And he has a great relationship with that staff, particularly Dante Williams, who's one of the best recruiters out west. At the same time, Damani's always had a wandering eye. He's even talked about scheduling an official visit to Alabama. And I think Michigan can get him in for an official visit too. If I'm Michigan, I'm just letting him know, look, you're still one of our guys. We still obviously want you. We would take you at any time. We'd love for you to come up this summer, but we really want you to come in for an OV in the fall. I think you get him on campus closer to signing day. I think you get him in for a game, and we'll see if there are people in the big house this year. But even if it's not at full capacity, even if there's some semblance of life in the big house, I think that atmosphere will be big. And it's important to keep in mind that his father, Randy, grew up a Michigan fan, being from the Dayton area and having a lot of family, still in the Midwest. That would be really big for him. I know Randy's always wanted to go to a Michigan game, and it would be really awesome for him to go this fall and for Damani to experience it. And look, Will Johnson's probably going to join him whenever he does, if he does make it to campus. Like you said, they played in Las Vegas at the Pylon 7-on-7 tournament and had a lot of fun together. They think they can complement each other well. If one were to flip, it definitely wouldn't be Will. He's not going anywhere. He's fully committed to Michigan, so it would have to be Damani. So I think you let Will handle the majority of that work. I'm sure Linguist will keep in contact with him here and there, and then you hope for a fall visit and see where things go during the early period. But Michigan, still in play. I'm not predicting a flip. I'm not saying that I'm expecting it, but Michigan's going to stay in there until he puts pen to paper in December.
It's a delicate balance when you're trying to recruit a guy that's already committed, because I feel like you don't want to push too hard. You don't want to bother him. You don't want to make him say, hey, just stop contacting me or whatever. But to have a guy like Will Johnson who's become friends with him just through the recruiting process in general, that will certainly help. Michigan continuing to recruit some others that are committed elsewhere, including the man who just popped up on your screen if you're watching on YouTube, Marquis Killebrew, the 4-star corner, 6 foot, 180 pounds, out of Snellville, Georgia. He's committed to the University of Georgia, the Bulldogs, but the Wolverines continuing to push for him, and they are in the mix, I guess you could say. And why not an in-state Georgia guy, and just be aggressive and go down and try to land him.
Yeah, this is one that was, I think, a surprise to many. We weren't really talking about Marquise at all, and then all of a sudden he tweets out, "I'm officially visiting Michigan." And so I think that was one of the biggest things we learned in the month of April, is that Michigan is going hard after Marquise and that he does have some interest. He wouldn't be visiting if he didn't have any interest at all. So that's definitely big. It's interesting how it happened. So basically, Linguist got in contact with Marquise. They had a couple of good conversations, and then Will Johnson got involved, and Will told him, "Hey, you should come out for an OV. I'm going to be there June 18th. Why don't you come up and join me?" And Marquis said he would think about it, got back to Will and told him he would officially visit, and then told Linguist, and then they both just started turning up the heat on him. So look, it's going to be tough to pull a guy from Georgia. It's going to be even tougher to pull a guy that's from Georgia, that's committed to Georgia. But at the same time, I think it's definitely a positive that he's coming in for an OV, that he's developing a little bit of a relationship with Will Johnson. And other talented DBs obviously want to play with Will Johnson. You see that with Damani Jackson. You see that with Miles Pollard, with Jaden Gould. All these guys love Will. I think Marquise is just another name to the list of highly touted defensive back targets this cycle that love Will Johnson and are very, very intrigued with the possibility of lining up with him. It's not like it's the quarterback position where there's only one guy. Michigan could have, 4 or 5, 6 DBs on the field at the same time, and they know that they can all do something special together on the back end. I actually asked Will, what's your pitch to these guys? What's your message to these guys? Come be part of the best defensive backfield in the country, play for a guy that's coached in the NFL like Mo Linguist. And it's a very simple pitch, but it's definitely has a lot of guys' attention. And I think you see that prime example with Marquis, an out of region kid that's committed to his home state school that at least wants to give Michigan a look.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot working against Michigan in this, mainly the fact that he's committed to another school, another big time program, like you said, an in state kid for that program. But there's a lot working in Michigan's favor in that Will Johnson's involved. He's coming up for an official visit, and Mo Linguist is an ace recruiter. So there's obviously some factors there that put Michigan in the mix here. And obviously, one of those things that we learned, like you said, was kind of a surprise a little bit. Wasn't really on the radar at this point just because he's committed to Georgia. But here we are, and we'll continue to monitor that as things progress. But that is, those are the 5 things that we learned in April. An eventful month, and we will do it again next month. Check us out at thewolverine.com. Promo code BLUE60 gets you 2 months of our premium content absolutely free.